Great. So, this is an interview for the Music Inclusion Coalition. And today we will be interviewing Will Curry. Will, if you'd like to introduce yourself.
Hi, yeah, I'm Will Curry. Um, I'm a violist, violinist, conductor, music director, teacher living in New York City.
Awesome. So, a little bit of background is we found you because you had this really awesome post about what it's like to be a music director. And we saw your Instagram that way and kind of got in touch with you through that. So, if you could give us kind of a brief background on how you got started, where you went to school, what your career path looked like, kind of that good stuff from the beginning of your life until now, just like cover it all.
Wonderful. Great. So I started playing piano when I was 5. Um, Not super well, it never really took, but that was my first introduction to music. And picked up violin and trumpet when I was 9. Switched to viola pretty quick, but kept up trumpet and viola and was taking singing lessons and was still taking piano lessons, even though I was not good at it, all through the end of high school. I grew up in Hershey, Pennsylvania, so land of chocolate.
Shout out to
I
chocolate.
yeah, exactly. I went to Northwestern for my undergrad, and I went as a viola major, but knew I wanted to be a conductor when I got there. So I was always a viola performance major. I started actually as a double viola performance music ed, and ended up dropping music ed um, because I really found that I was more passionate about performing at that time. So really wanted to focus my energies there. So yeah, I went to Northwestern for viola, did a lot of conducting. Upon graduation, was supposed to stay at Northwestern for a master's in orchestral conducting, but that summer, through a show that I was playing, made some connections and got a job offer for the Les Mis tour as violist and assistant conductor, and I just like went off on the road. So I toured for 3 years, and that production of Les Mis was ultimately the production that brought me to New York. And so I did the revival of Les Mis in New York in 2014, again as viola and assistant conductor, and um, then was fortunate to sort of jump to a couple shows after that. Did Fiddler, did the Miss Saigon revival, did My Fair Lady at Lincoln Center, and the Miss Saigon revival was the one that eventually sent me out on the road as the music director, which was what I was doing up until, you know, that's third week of March when everything stopped.
Yeah. So you said kind of you're a violist by trade, a
Yes.
little bit more than anything, although obviously very well versed in a lot of things. What was that like then becoming a conductor, especially a music director? Where I mean, traditionally almost all music directors are pianists. So what did that look like?
Yeah. I let's see. The real turning point for me where I realized I could do this. I It was my senior year of college. They were doing the Lincoln Center was doing that revival of South Pacific, which still is one of my favorite productions that's ever existed. And I on spring break had come to New York to see shows, and got a student rush ticket to see South Pacific, and I knew that one of my friends' moms was subbing in the cello section, and so I pulled up the playbill to be like, oh, I wonder who she's subbing for. Like I was curious because I was just getting an idea of like what the Broadway scene looked like, and so the idea of subbing on a show was like a new concept. So I like was going through the playbill and I'm going through the cello section, and I get to a name in the cello section that reads cello slash associate conductor, and I was like, hold on a second, what? Like it was just a moment where like the light bulb went off in my head and I was like, wait, I can do this. I was like, that's my job description, only it's viola instead of cello. I was like, I can do that. And little did I know that he also played a lot of the rehearsals on piano, but I didn't know that at the time. And so like that I realized that combination exists, particularly in shows that don't have a keyboard at all in the pit or only have one keyboard and they need other conductors there. So that was sort of the moment that I realized it could be a thing. But I was still in school and I was doing the classical thing. And then when I got this job offer to go on the road, it was specifically we want you to play viola and then be like the backup cover conductor. Um, because Les Mis is so symphonic and that was my training. And I was like, well, yeah, of course, like that makes sense. And we already had 2 keyboard players. So there was plenty of people to cover the rehearsal books. So there was never a need for me to play piano on the show. Um, and you know, when I say I'm not a pianist, you need to understand that like, I went to a music school where like everybody was top of their game. Like I was definitely the back of the viola section for a lot of my time at Northwestern. So like when I say I don't play piano, I don't play piano, you know, like Lang Lang. Like I don't play piano like a concert pianist because I was in school with concert pianists. But I can get around on the instrument, but I never had to play a rehearsal on Les Mis. Um, and it was when I moved to the city, I understood that piano was an important skill. So I was like, you know what, I'm going to work on it and started taking piano lessons. And my piano lessons ended up morphing into just an artistic pursuit, and has really helped me as a string player. But I'm by no means like a great pianist. And so I really had, I felt like I for a long time was sort of using viola as my crutch to like get into the conducting positions. And as I've gotten older and had more experience in the industry, I've kind of realized that like my combination of viola conductor is very special and has been my golden ticket through this industry. I I've just been fortunate that I've never had to play piano for a show because when you're in New York, there are a plethora of rehearsal pianists, and there's always people you know, that are connected with the music director or the music team that can come in and play rehearsals for whatever reason. So I never really had to. It became a moment when I was going out on Saigon as the music director. The rehearsal team had to be convinced, the creative team had to be convinced that we'd be covered well enough without me playing piano because you're on the road. So we don't always have access to a um, a rehearsal accompanist. And the interesting thing is what I learned through that process is, music direction is so multifaceted, and there are definitely people that can do all of it. But for the most part, most of us do some of it really, really well, and we can fake some of it okay, and there may be a couple things that we don't do at all. And so you just, it's why we have teams, right? It's like my on Saigon, my associate conductor is he's an obscenely good piano player. I mean, like this is an individual who might be one of my favorite pianists in the city. I mean, spectacular player. So whenever we needed a pianist, he played, right? And like my assistant conductor, another really great piano player. Um, and when my associate left the show a year in, the woman that we hired to take his position also was an incredible piano player because that was where my skill set was weaker, in terms of other things. But for a show like Miss Saigon, you need a spectacular conductor who can craft and shape and mold every moment of the show because it's just dripping with melodrama. So it made sense for me to music direct and to conduct that show because of my training as a classical conductor and my experience as a violist, right? Like my entire world as a string player is just dripping with melodrama anyway. And so it just made sense. It was just like the
Is
right
that like sitting
combination,
next to the violin?
right? Like with going out on the road on Saigon, it's funny, I wish someone had said this to me when I was in college. My skills as a violist are or my experience as a violist is why I'm a good conductor. Like as a violist, my entire life is about supporting the other people around me. Very rarely do I get to be the star as the violist, but I have an immense power to make the violin section sound rich. And I can really sink into the cello sound to make the cellos sound like there's more of them. I can color a horn. I can color the clarinet. I can support a flute. Like the viola is such a versatile instrument but its versatility is unknown. Like my goal is that you shouldn't sit there and say, wow, that viola sounds great. You should sit there and say, wow, the violins sound beautiful. The horn is so gorgeous. You should always be hearing the instrument that I'm coloring, which means that I'm, as a violist, sort of the ultimate collaborator, which is what makes me a great conductor, right? Because it means that when I'm on the podium, it's not about me. It's about whoever I'm coloring or whoever I'm supporting at that moment. Oh, sorry. Like mentorship and apprenticeship is such a huge part of our industry that's really not talked about.
And I guess that's another question I have. So,
Yeah.
for someone that is naturally a pianist, goes into that field and then ends up in this world, they kind of have that built-in mentorship and that built-in support system and that pathway almost. So how did you face that? How did you find those opportunities? How did you overcome that without, the traditional career path where it was expected?
Yeah, I mean, I think some of it is asking for what you want. So definitely some of it is asking. I'm a Taurus, so like if you believe what you want, but like I am stubborn. I'm extremely stubborn and very hardworking and very down to earth. I'm like, I'm gonna put the work in, and I also will show you that I'm putting the work in. So I think about when I first joined Les Mis, the tour, the contractor had hired me as the like backup cover conductor, but that information had never really been relayed to the music director. So I had to walk into the room and say, "Hey, I'm your like backup emergency cover conductor." And he was like, "Oh, but you're playing viola." And I was like, "Yeah, you talk to the contractor about it." And he's like, "Okay, cool." And then I was like, "Can I have a copy of the score?" And he was like, "Sure, sure." And then like months went by and there was like I didn't hear anything. So I just would take the score and just start showing up to rehearsals and sit in the theater and just watch understudy rehearsals. But just I would just be there. I would just like be around all the time. And then during one of those rehearsals, the associate turned to the music director and was like, "Hey, I want to take a vacation this week." And the music director turned to me and said, "Will you be ready to conduct by then?" And I was like, "Yes, absolutely." But that wouldn't have happened if I hadn't have been in the room, just sitting there, doing the things. And then, like when I left Les Mis, I had been recommended by a colleague, actually the wife of the cello conductor from South Pacific. It's all related. She had written to the other assistant conductor on Les Mis and told him, "Hey, look, they're doing this production of Fiddler, and normally they would hire my husband to do this cello conductor spot, but he's already on another show. Will should write to the music director and just say that he's available." So I did. I wrote a cold email to Ted Sperling, who is someone that I like idolize. And I was like this little kid in New York being like, "Hey, I do this. Like I'm on Les Mis. I'll get you a ticket to the show." And he was like, "Thank you for the offer. I don't need to sit through Les Mis." But fortunately, that week I was also conducting like a tiny 5 minute chamber piece through the Broadway chamber players. And I was like, "Hey, how about this thing? It's 5 minutes long." And he was like, "Great, perfect." And that was a
Who
better
doesn't want to
opportunity
sit through
because
3 hours of Les Mis?
I would, but that's
I
different.
love Les Mis.
Me too. Um, so it's a little bit of asking for what you want. It's a little bit of like getting your face in the room to whatever extent that is. It's a little bit of like just trying to get to know people who do similar things to you, so that they can. I mean, like if I'm going to talk about myself specifically, like if an instrumentalist conductor reaches out to me and says, "Hey, I really want to do this. How do I do it?" Like that is someone that I am really interested in mentoring and in helping along, because if I had, I mean, because I had those people, right? Like I had the people um that like carried me through or championed me or called contractors or called their friends and said, "Hey, this kid's doing good things, keep your eye on them," like that kind of thing. you know I think it's just about finding a way to get your foot in the door, which is not an easy answer, but is also kind of the answer, right? It's about being present.
But I think that to that end, something that you touched on that I think is just such great advice is finding those people that are doing what you want to do and just asking. Because, like you said, you love helping those students. You want to see more of the, you're that first person that's like, yeah, let me help. Like, let me give back. Let me help the next generation moving forward. So I think that that's something that when you're really young is kind of scary and intimidating, and you feel like this person is just too great. But when you're on the other side of that, I think that's just such a great point is people that have done it want to help.
And
Um,
I get so inspired by people of younger generations who want to do it. Like I feel like I have conversations with one of my musicians from the tour who is like just getting started in his career, and we talk about stuff and I'm like, "Oh, I should go listen to that." Like I'm constantly finding new music and new perspectives. And so I understand that feeling of not wanting to be a burden to someone who you look up to, but it's very much not a burden. And at least in my opinion, it's very much like I look at this as this is a new perspective and a new idea and a whole new entity of someone who experiences music that I can learn from as well.
and that passion that someone that's just starting out, I think, brings to the table when sometimes as you grow in your career, you get a little more jaded, and so I always think that that's really nice to see that kind of refreshed perspective in the room always. um,
Yes.
I have to ask because I'm sure people are going to want to know, what is it like to be on Broadway? Like, what is that moment of seeing your name in a playbill? Like, how is, like, just tell me a little bit about that. Like,
It's
you're
funny, like
backstage at Broadway.
it's funny. So the day to day is normal. Like it doesn't. It's not like I walk into the theater and I'm like, oh, it's Broadway. Like I walk into the theater and I'm like, oh, it's the doorman. But like for me, I'm in performance mode. I'm in work mode. So like when I walk into the theater, I'm like, oh, okay, my body hurts. I'm doing this. I'm doing this. I'm stressed out about this. I haven't cleaned my apartment. Blah blah. Like I'm thinking about 1,000 different things. Like the real special moments for me are, I mean, obviously it's like an opening night or like doing My Fair Lady, the orchestra was on stage for the top of Act Two, and so the very first time when you're on that Vivian Beaumont stage and the curtain goes up and you're on stage and like it's just like it's a complete head rush. It's shocking. The experience of like conducting a show for the first time is terrible, but then you get to the end and you're like, whoa, I just conducted that show on Broadway. Like it's a weird thing. Again, I think about My Fair Lady, and we got to the middle of Act One when we got to Danced All Night, and I was like, I feel like I'm flying. I feel like I am floating in the air, and this is really cool. But like the experience of being on Broadway is, and I don't say this to like dampen the dream, it feels normal in a really wonderful way. And really, my favorite part about being on Broadway is the people that I get to collaborate with, like the string players that I get to play with. Interestingly, a lot of us have very similar stories in that we didn't really fit exactly into a mold. And so a lot of us turned to theater because of that. And so the community is spectacular.
How did you end up? I guess we covered a lot of music school, but how did you end up in music school? Like, what, going from high school, how did you decide majoring in music? What was that process like? And then what advice would you give during that senior year process of figuring out, like, I want to be a musician, now what? That
Yeah.
kind of moment.
Music was always, it's funny, I would have said music was always my hobby, but music was literally everything I did. I mean, we're talking like marching band, concert band, jazz band, symphony orchestra, string orchestra, choir, musical. I mean, like if there was a musical ensemble at my high school, I was in it. And so when it came time, I was the end of my junior year. I went to the Pennsylvania Governor's School for music, which is a summer program, no longer exists, sadly. But I went. It was my first time like going to a like you know sleep away like summer program, and it was the first time. I mean, Governor's School is all about interdisciplinary arts, so they make a big point to constantly be exposing you to all the other art forms that are there: dance, drama, creative writing, um, visual arts, and music. Those five are all together on the same campus. So they make a big point that everyone is mixed up constantly, and you have to go to every performance throughout the summer, which meant that I got exposed to contemporary dance, which I'd never seen before. I got exposed to like scene work that wasn't like a musical because I didn't really see plays very often when I was I would see musicals, but I'd never seen a play. I got exposed to like sculpture and painting in a way that I'd never been. So that was really formative, and the program focuses on arts advocacy. So it was the first time in my life that I realized that music could be a service industry, and that music could exist to affect change in the world around you. Um, and as soon as I found that out, I was like, oh my God, I have to do this. It was like that moment, discovering the idea, being introduced to the idea of arts advocacy, which is not really that complex of an idea, but I had never heard it described that way. And as soon as I heard it, I was like, that, I have to do that. Um, it's also where I took my first conducting class. And so I was also like, that, I have to do that too. And so I came home from governor's school that summer. Interestingly, was there for trumpet, but I spent the whole summer practicing viola. And I came home from governor's school being like, one, I'm majoring in music. Two, I'm not going to play the trumpet. I'm playing viola. Um, that was that. And my parents are both doctors, but my dad had gone to governor's school when he was in high school on organ. he's a pianist and organist as well. So he very much got it. He went to governor school and was like, this music life is not for me. I'm also passionate about medicine, so I'm going to go be a doctor. But he understood when I came home and I was like, I have to do music. He was like, got it. I've been there. I know what you're feeling. Okay. And my parents were like, no conservatory. You have to go to a university program, which was perfect for me because I was already a very academic student, and my academics at Northwestern really affected how I practiced and learned music in a great way. Not everybody's wired that way. Like there are definitely some people that conservatory is great for. So I think if you're that high school student being like, I'm a senior, oh my God, how am I going to go into music? Understand your learning process, because conservatory programs and university programs can have the same caliber of performance, but it's a very different experience. And there are definitely some people that vibe with the conservatory, all music, all the time. And I thought I was one of those people. And my mother was like, you're not. And my first week at Northwestern, I called home and I was like, okay, you were right. Because the academic world and being surrounded by people who weren't musicians just further solidified who I was as an artist. And and also Northwestern is a whole community of people that are just like obsessed with finding out what everyone else does. It's a really beautifully like supportive, world. So it was great to like be in the dorm with, econ majors who were equally as interested in my work as I was finding out about econ, and also finding out that I was terrible at econ, but that's a different story. So like it was that. And then also like I think the biggest thing that I stressed out about a lot, and now that I like watch a lot of auditions, like I just watched youth symphony auditions for an orchestra in Pennsylvania a few weeks ago, and like don't stress out so much about the music that you're playing. I mean, obviously like pick the music within the guidelines that are listed. Like for viola, they're probably going to say something unaccompanied, probably Bach. Though a lot of music programs, this is amazing. A lot of programs are taking the names off of the lists because they're trying to make their lists more inclusive, which I love. So they'll just say play an unaccompanied piece, or they might say play an unaccompanied piece with that's similar difficulty to the Bach suites. So like you'll have to play an unaccompanied piece, an etude, a sonata, and a concerto, right? Like don't I think I stressed out a lot about like picking a piece that was like hard enough, but a piece I could play, and like show yourself well. Pick music that you can play well. And like the beauty of like if you like the Bach suites, the difficulty level is huge. I mean, the range of difficulty is huge, right? Like there's so much in there. And also there's so much like if you're great at playing fast, play a fast movement. If you're great at like beautiful slow tone color, play that. I think I would much rather see a student play really well and show off their strengths than try to do something that they're struggling with. And I think the other thing too is to remember that when you go into these audition rooms, it is not just about how you play, it's also who you are. And that's not the case for all programs, but like, maybe it's just me, but like I want to be in a program that values me and values my playing. I don't want to be in a program that's just like, well, you can hit all the notes. Okay, good. And so I think like, especially if you want a really holistic college experience, like understand what the programs are looking for, get to meet the teachers, or at least contact them, email them. I mean, nowadays, it's like Zoom didn't exist when I was applying to college. So like now maybe they'll Zoom with you, like, find ways to connect with the teacher to understand if you get along with them, but also understand you know, the school and like what the school has to offer. And because my experience at Northwestern was so much more than just my viola teacher. So much more. My conducting teacher was so special to me, but my experience there was so much more than just my time with him.
I think my last question for you
Yeah.
is, the industry's hard at times, and it's hard to be a musician, and you are bearing your soul every night on stage, or in the practice room. What brings you back every time that you're like, this is hard? Like when you have like your worst day ever, what's the thing that keeps you doing music?
I mean, the fact that if when I'm having a bad day, if I imagine what my life looked like without music, I can't. I mean, it's like the screen goes to black. Like I honestly don't know what my life would, I cannot imagine, I can't manifest in my head like what my life would look like without music. So if I have a bad day, I can even go to the extreme of being like, what if tomorrow somebody said you can never do this again for the rest of your life? I'm like, well, that makes me feel a whole lot worse than what I'm feeling right now. So I think that's what makes me keep coming back. And also like I have several pieces of music that like just really get to me, like really just make me feel everything. And if I'm really, really down, like I can go to those. Um, Sometimes even look, I mean, it was the I was doing this shower series. I was playing music in my playing recording songs of me playing viola in my shower because the acoustics were great, and it was going to be this fun, lovely project. And then the week that I was recording was the week of the George Floyd murder, and I was like, I sat there being trying to record this Telemon, lovely, sweet Telemon piece in my shower, being like, what am I doing? Like, and just all of it felt insincere and didn't work. And I was like, you know what? I was like, I just need to have a moment to like process my feelings. And I pulled out the Sarabande from the C minor um, Bach prelude. So the Bach suite, the C minor number 5. And I was like, this is it. This is exactly the emotional complexity that I'm feeling right now, the confusion and the emptiness and the darkness that is going on. And I was like, that it's moments like that that make me realize how important music is to me, because while it is a service industry, like at the end of the day, I feel a little selfish saying this, but like it brings me so much joy and satisfaction. And I really, truly, honestly cannot imagine what my life would look like without it, like at all. And I think that's what brings me back, is it's this thought of like, yeah, there are days that it's hard. There are days that your back hurts. There's days that you can't imagine playing Les Mis for the 1800th time. Like there's so many days like that. And then I just think about like, what would my life look like without? And on a like micro level, like when I'm playing a show over and over again, if I really get dark about the show, I will go watch the people coming into the house. I'll go to the front of the theater and just like stand across the street and just like look at everybody coming in the theater, and you can just sense the excitement. Like everybody's just like, so they can't wait. You talked about it. Like when you walk into a Broadway house, there's just that energy. And sometimes backstage you don't feel that because you're so worried about or focused on the details of getting your life together, and getting ready to do the work, because it is work. It can be really fun work some days, and it can just be work other days. But then I can watch people coming into the theater, and I'm like, oh God, look how excited they are. And then I sit there and I'm like, right, my job is to make sure that they have a great experience, and they will have a great experience if I'm having a great experience. So, you know,
I really love that answer. I think that joy of someone going to their first show in New York, or if they're the person that will see Les Mis 8,000 times, there are just those people that are, you watch them with the little, oh, I love the little tiny kids that go to the Disney shows in their little dresses and
yes,
costumes. And you just you feel that excitement. And I think that's such an important thing for all of us to hold on to as musicians. Always is just that person who's going to just love that moment that you give them. So
yeah.
I think that's great. So to wrap up,
Mm-hmm.
this is again Music Inclusion Coalition. You can find us at Music Inclusion Coalition on Instagram and Facebook, or you can visit our website, www.musicinclusioncoalition.com. And Will, where can they go to find you?
Let's see, Instagram at WJ Curry, Curry. That's probably the best spot. You can, same thing for Twitter, but I don't really post on Twitter. So Instagram is really it. Instagram, WJ Curry is me.
Perfect.